Okay, I moved my camera. It was getting a little windy up there on a hilltop. But I'm pulled away from the mansion a little bit. This is the Allen Institute. I pulled away from it so you can see just the top of it. And I wanted to talk about a subject about Oswald being weaponized. Now, I believe after 40 years of research, Oswald was weaponized to assassinate Vice President Richard Nixon. If you look at the overall picture, it fits in better. Because here's the thing. Oswald basically was a man that basically became a follower of communism, adopted the communist belief system. And of course, it might have been all part of a picture created by the Rockefellers. We don't know, but here's the thing. There's a couple facts you got to put together here. In 1958, Nelson Rockefeller got elected governor of New York State. The next day, he put together a team of 70 people charged with putting him in the White House by 1960. All right, so he did run in 1960. He ran in the primary. He bowed out early to back John Kennedy because the Kennedys were Rockefeller business partners. You got to understand, Nelson Rockefeller's ambition was always to be president, and if he has a sense he can't quite get there, then he's going to put somebody in that he could have complete control of. And he thought he had complete control of the Rockefellers, and the Rockefellers helped Kennedy get elected. And then the Kennedys turned on Rockefeller when Rockefeller got reelected governor in 62. Now, Governor Rockefeller was, well, the top Republican candidate to run for the White House, and Kennedy confided in his close advisors that he believed Nelson Rockefeller was going to be his biggest opposition, strongest opponent to getting reelected. So the Kennedys were out to destroy Nelson Rockefeller as a political candidate in 1964. And if you know the history, Rockefeller was the leading Republican candidate right up until like the second or third night of the Republican primary when an unlikely Senator Barry Goldwater edged Rockefeller out because Rockefeller was considered too liberal for the right wing of the Republican Party. And Rockefeller blasted back at his party over that defeat. So you got to realize, 1958, if Nelson Rockefeller had his sights on the White House, who would be his biggest opponent? Was Richard Nixon, Vice President Richard Nixon. JFK, Kennedy wasn't even on a blimp on the radar screen yet. Oswald was deployed was sent to Russia to be weaponized as a Manchurian candidate, unknown to Oswald. You know, all these experiments most of these experiments done here, and these LSD and mind control and hypnosis, whatever they use, the patients were unaware that these diabolical poisons were being jabbed into people's bodies, and they were being subjected to all kinds of mind control. The patients never knew that. Manchurian candidates are not ever going to know they're being groomed to be a Manchurian candidate. But here's the thing. So who was the biggest? So Oswald was sent to Russia at September 58. JFK wasn't even part of the political landscape, as far as the presidential run. So who was it really being programmed to kill? It was Richard Nixon. Because Richard Nixon was the red baiter. The communist, he was painting people red. And he went after primarily who? He made himself famous. That's how he got to be vice president, attacking Alger Hess. Alger Hess worked for who? Nelson Rockefeller. As part of setting up the UN, which Rockefeller set up the UN. Now all our sovereignty today is gradually being basically turned over to the UN. which means our democracy and our Bill of Rights have been completely eliminated. And don't forget that UN is pretty much, created by the Rockefellers, run by the Rockefellers, and they own the air rights for the UN complex. I got a nice little oasis here of shade, and we're kind of out of the wind a little bit, but we got vehicle noise here. But you got to bear it. The truth takes a little pain because I'm not selling corporate products. Unlike NBC, CBS, MSNBC, CNN, Rockefeller, bogus news outlets. This is the truth. Well, this is where the truth has to, in our society, unfortunately, the truth has to take a real distant second. So who would Nelson Rockefeller be going after? It was Richard Nixon, who was the communist red baiter. So here comes this communist back to America. Is he going to shoot JFK? The liberal president from the North, Democrat liberal president from the North, who made the phone call to, the phone call would change America, the voting Democrats of America. Massachusetts Senator called Coretta King when her husband MLK was jailed for civil rights protests. He made a 90-second phone call, changed America. He offered her, basically he said, if I could do anything for you, let me know. And Coretta King long remembered his Massachusetts accent. Now keep in mind he was only a senator then. I shouldn't say only. So who would the Rockefellers be gunning for? In '58, it would have been Richard Nixon. See, Nixon didn't get elected. Well, I'll put elected. I don't want to go into that. There's always been allegations that the 1960 election was rigged against Nixon, and Nixon was going to challenge it, and Eisenhower talked him out of doing it. Well, that's all in history books. I'm not making this stuff up. See, so now Kennedy turned on the Rockefellers, okay, because Rockefeller became the top challenger. Governor Rockefeller became the top challenger in 1964 for the 1964 election. So Oswald, they had a kind of like, there was a massive hole in the Watergate whitewash that Oswald was this communist. Well, why would a communist kill JFK? Well, then they said, he wanted attention. He just happened to be ordered his rifle out of the back of a magazine and happened to be working in his Texas school book depository. And the president just happened to be going by in his motorcade, and Oswald just happened to pick up his rifle, and he was seeking attention, just happened to shoot the president. See, that's how they had to gel this communist, this so-called alleged a communist Oswald, who really was a Manchurian candidate. But then again, I said he never pulled the trigger. Well, he wasn't a sniper, a marksman, or he was not a high-quality shooter. He was just thrown at the crime scene and take the blame. And then the thing about the communism. See, so it makes more sense that he was being programmed to kill Richard Nixon, the famous red baiter. Now, if you know the story, there was an assassination attempt against Richard Nixon in Venezuela, a Vice President Richard Nixon. If you know the story, if you know your history, where a gang of a rioting mob of communists went after Nixon's car and flipped it upside down, smashed the windows. People were wounded by flying glass. And then the Venezuelan army came in and rescued him. Also, he probably would have been assassinated. But see, Venezuela, the Rockefellers ran Venezuela. They had the Creole Oil Company. Nelson Rockefeller ran Venezuelan oil. And if you know some more information and Warren Commission documents, I can point these out to you. Oswald's best friend was seeking employment with Nelson Rockefeller in Venezuela. There was a document that came out of the Mexican embassy in Washington So that George Morenci was seeking employment with Nelson Rockefeller in their oil subsidiary in Venezuela, and also in Warren Commission document 533, it was the same words. He was seeking employment with Standard Oil in Venezuela. Of course, Creole Oil was run by Nelson Rockefeller. And Nelson Rockefeller had a 22,000-acre ranch in Venezuela. Yeah, so it fits better in that it was really meant to kill Richard Nixon. Now, here's the thing. Richard Nixon had really torqued off the Rockefellers because he was investigating Alger Hess. See, what the Rockefellers were doing was they were using... But Alger Hess was president of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Set up by... Well, it really wasn't set up by Andrew Carnegie. But who was on the board of the foundation? It was Alger Hess, David Rockefeller, citizen Dwight Eisenhower, and the Watson family of IBM fame. And the Rockefellers controlled by the time of Nelson Rockefeller's appointment as VP, the Rockefellers controlled 600,000 shares of IBM stock. See, and who was chairman of the Carnegie Endowment for Internet? It was John Foster Dulles, whose brother was a Warren Commissioner. What the Rockefellers were doing, they had set up various families, and they were sitting families, multiple brothers and fathers, and various foundations that they controlled, like the Dulleses. One sat on the Ford Foundation, one sat on the Rockefeller Foundation, one sat on the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Now, here's a story about the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. I'll just call it the Carnegie Endowment. It was not set up by Andrew Carnegie. It was set up by a man named Nicholas Murray Butler. That's the name you probably don't know. David Rockefeller talked a little about him in his memoirs, but I knew about him anyways through the writings of Emmanuel Josephson. See, the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, the Carnegie Endowment was run out of Columbia University by Nicholas Murray Butler. Actually, what happened, Butler set up the foundation, some kind of a foundation for world peace advocacy, and he talked Andrew Carnegie to donate $10 million to the foundation, and then they put Carnegie's name on it. And all the records of the Carnegie Endowment are stored where? Columbia University. Now here's the kicker. All right. It was Nicholas Murray Butler who signed a contract with the Rockefellers. Rockefeller Center was built on 23 acres. They had a 75-year lease of 23 acres of Midtown Manhattan, which is owned by Columbia University. The Rockefellers were paying their rent to who? Columbia University. And Nicholas Murray Butler was the guy who signed that rent agreement, that lease agreement with the Rockefellers. And here's Allen Dulles on the Warren Commission, whose brother was running the foundation for the Rockefellers. And of course, the investigations of Alger Hess, involved Dwight Eisenhower. When Richard Nixon was investigating Alger Hess, it involved John Foster Dulles. It was kind of like, didn't look good for Dwight Eisenhower either. David Rockefeller was on the foundation. Well, what else? So John Foster Dulles had to resign. But what worse was, it was exposing these foundations. They didn't want the public to know that all these foundations were so many foundations, like the Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundations, dozens and dozens of them, possibly thousands, are being run by the Rockefellers secretively to serve the greater Rockefeller mission, which is complete sovereignty of the planet, where all human beings will be reduced to farm animal status. That's what these foundations are doing. There'll be a very thin billionaire class, like Bill Gates, the Rockefellers, bioweapons general, and George Soros, the Rockefeller street violence general. Go ahead, George Soros was a Nazi Jew, and he was serving the Nazis. And see, Hitler came to power through what? Street violence. Of course, Hitler was a Rockefeller hand puppet dictator, birthed out of the International Building at Rockefeller Center. That's another story. See, that's what happened. See, they were out to get Richard Nixon. The original plot was to kill Richard Nixon in 1958. The original plot was to kill Richard Nixon. And that's why Oswald was weaponized to become a Manchurian candidate. But what happened was Nixon got defeated by Kennedy with Rockefeller help in 1960. See, if you take from the Rockefellers in secrecy, you do so on the penalty of death. That's why they're out to get Trump, because Trump took from the Rockefeller. He received Rockefeller's support. I don't know to what extent, because he met with Henry Kissinger. Trump was summoned to 535 East 52nd Street, they call it River House. And that was kind of his command center there. When Trump became a serious candidate, Kissinger summoned him there. I saw it on the news. I saw him going up. I saw Trump going into the building. There's a courtyard there. I saw Trump going in. And also Hillary Clinton met with Kissinger too. And I know that because Bernie, who ran as an anti-Rockefeller candidate, anti-establishment candidate, he said it during debates that Hillary met with Henry Kissinger, and he was very happy with Henry Kissinger's management of the Vietnam War. See, that's why they're out to destroy Trump. If you take from the Rockefeller, if you remember the story, when Trump got elected, he appointed Rex Tillerson to be a Secretary of State. Rex Tillerson was the head of Standard Oil. He was chairman of the board of Standard Oil. Well, it's called Exxon now, but I like to use the word Standard Oil. Rockefeller Standard Oil, headquartered in Rockefeller Center, although it's recently moved to Dallas, Texas. And then Rex Tillerson, it was only like 1 or 2 weeks into the administration, Rex Tillerson declared Trump a moron, and Trump fired Tillerson. The reason he called Trump a moron, see, Trump turned against the Rockefeller for the people. Trump wanted to bring down the price of gasoline at the pump. That was what he was, and he wanted to cut into Rockefeller profitability. See, forgetting the save the planet side of this whole story, if you forget that for a moment, it was about bringing down the price of gas at the pump. The Rockefellers, under Trump, gas fell to $2 a gallon. Well, the Rockefellers couldn't make money at that price. That's why they had to basically step in and they selected yo-yo President Biden. And then the price doubled to $5 a gallon after Biden shut down the pipeline, shut down the pipeline, XL pipeline in America, and then opened up the big gas pipeline or whatever, the pipeline over there in Europe. And that's how the price of oil went up to $120 a barrel. That's how Putin got his money to invade the Ukraine. Well, anyways, if you take from the Rockefellers under the table as the Kennedys did and as the Trump did, you do so under the penalty of death. I'll tell you, if Nelson Rockefeller was alive today, believe me, I know Kissinger's the boss of the Rockefeller Incorporated, but Nelson, maybe he doesn't have a taste for blood like Nelson Rockefeller did. That was one of the main reasons they killed JFK, because JFK took from the Rockefellers. And then, Rockefeller, when JFK was elected president, he walked hand in hand, and Nelson Rockefeller walked hand in hand with the president-elect JFK into the White House. When JFK moved into the White House, Nelson Rockefeller moved in. First of all, JFK staff were people who worked for the Rockefellers. Secretary of State, I'm forgetting some of these names. As I was saying, when JFK moved into the White House, Nelson Rockefeller followed right in, because Dean Acheson, Kennedy's Secretary of State, was president of the Rockefeller Foundation. C. Douglas Dillon, Secretary of Treasury, was a trustee of the Rockefeller Foundation. And Robert McNamara, by the mid-1950s, the Rockefellers had taken over the Ford Foundation. And I told you Warren Commissioner Alan Dulles was on the Ford Foundation, as was John McCloy, was chairman of the Ford Foundation. And he had an interlocking directorship with the Rockefeller Foundation. But also, very significantly, with McGeorge Bundy, who they call Mac Bundy. His father, Harvey Bundy, was he was the chairman of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace after John Foster Dulles died. And William Bundy, brother William Bundy, he married Dean Achetson's daughter. See, the Bundy family, what the Rockefellers did, they set up a conspiracy, a foundation rule, 501c3s, and they were sitting various family members, brothers, fathers, and various boards, like the Fosdick family, the Flexner family. There was three brothers. Fosdick, there was at least two, and the Bundy family. They would be sitting, and when Bundy left the Kennedy administration, well, actually the Johnson administration, he took over from John McCloy, chairmanship of the Ford Foundation. See what they're doing? That's the conspiracy, the foundations, because that's where the Rockefellers control the nation's wealth, especially corporate shares, national government bonds, municipal bonds. They control all this wealth, real estate. Valuable real estate, and of course, valuable intellectual properties and art collections. It's all controlled through a network of 501c3s you run out of Pocantico. And in fact, the Ford Foundation records are stored at the Rockefeller Archives in Pocantico. And like I say, Robert McNamara, who was president of Ford Motor Company. See, the Rockefellers had taken over the Ford Foundation. You see how things worked out? And also, C. Douglas Dillon, Secretary of Treasury, was very close to John Rockefeller III. And that, C. Douglas Dillon, he was president of Dillon Reed, and that ties to the murder of James Forstrell, because James Forstrell was the top executive in Dillon Reed. Just to summarize here a little bit, I'm here at Montreal at the Allen Institute, where the MK Ultra experiments were done. They were kind of the CIA was the oversight of the thing, and it was all done by the Rockefellers. This is actually, Allen Institute is actually a psychic hospital, which for over a century has been financed by the Rockefeller Foundation. And Dr. Gottlieb, they're diabolical doctors. The Rockefellers have a lot of diabolical doctors. Joseph Mengele, Dr. Quack Fauci. These are their dark and dirty doctors, so-called scientists. Gottlieb. But see, they got to take this stuff out of the laboratory and then they deploy it, they weaponize it. And it was the developed Manchurian candidates. And Oswald was being developed as a Manchurian candidate asset, and he was part of the United States military arsenal weapon, just like nuclear bombs and 500-pound bunker busters and rockets, all part of the the nation's defense system. So that's why Oswald was introduced to George Marinchy by a colonel. So he was checking in on Oswald, because Oswald's a deadly weapon. And it's a very significant weapon because he's going to be taking out world leaders. And I said he was weaponized originally to kill communist Red Baiter Richard Nixon. That didn't happen. Instead, they kind of had to basically use him to kill Kennedy. They kind of had to come up with some kind of stories to explain why a communist would kill a liberal Northern Democrat who made the 90-second phone call that changed America. So they had to kind of modify their Warren Commission alibis and stuff. And, it ties into the, Sirhan was definitely a Manchurian candidate. He ties in with the Corona breeding ranch run by Desi Arnaz, who ran RKO. RKO Desert Escorts, Lucille Ball's husband. RKO was the first tenant in Rockefeller Center, and they had a movie theater, RKO Movie Theater, which was co-founded by the Rockefellers and Joseph Kennedy Sr. And, well, that's about it, folks. I keep losing my train of thought. It's such a massive story. And also Sirhan, but I'm talking Squeaky Fromm, because Charles Manson was a weaponized asset. Because remember, he was using LSD to control family members. The people who carried out they were ordered by Manson to kill. Manson didn't directly kill those victims. He ordered people to kill them, and that's what MK Ultra was about. Ordered people to go. People under LSD hypnosis and that type of, and see, they have to weaponize this stuff. They have to deploy it. And the Spawn Ranch was run by Howard Hughes, who also, he was also, his family history ties to the oil industry, and he also was a leading figure in the motion picture industry. I think he won the first Academy Award for producing a movie. And he filmed a movie on Spawn Ranch, a very famous movie that involved Jane Russell. It was a cowboy movie. Yeah, the movie that Howard Hughes produced at the Spawn Ranch was The Outlaw, starring Jane Russell, who was Howard Hughes' girlfriend. And Howard Hughes designed the bras for Jane Russell, and she did television commercials for years, but that's a little bit of trivia there. And so there's your Manchurian candidates. And Squeaky Fromm held a .45 automatic 10 inches from President Ford's heart and failed to pull the trigger. And don't forget who was vice president. Nelson Rockefeller. If Squeaky Fromm had done the job she was deployed to do, Nelson would have been president and not elected. He was originally appointed. If Squeaky Fromm had done the job she was programmed to do, Nelson Rockefeller would have been president and not elected. And Warren Commission member President Ford, was not elected either. Well, that's it. And this is it. MK Ultra, Allen Institute, Psychic Hospital, run by the Rockefeller Foundation, MK Ultra, here in Montreal. Okay, signing off.